So these are the windrows that we started building, and again, we basically, every few weeks we build another windrow, and so we had windrows in different stages of how hot they were. So we had the coolest windrow over here, that was one built like a year ago, and then we started building them along here, and some of them this one was lower, we just topped it off because we needed a space to compost this spring, and we just didn't have space. So most of them were more like maybe that height, maybe a little bit shorter than that when we built them, and then covered them with the hoops. So, you know, this is basically just rediscovering something that people have put to good use for centuries, but it's really exciting to find something that was so easy and so reliable, and like just, you know, spend one morning building the compost windrow and like you're good for the next couple months. So for this fall, I won't use in the fall, but probably in March when we start needing to move stuff outside, or maybe mid-February, then we'll just top them off, build some more, and make them a little bit higher, and then put it back to use again. This is our solar and compost heated greenhouse that we just finished building in January of this year. So in addition to gaining heat from the sun during the day, we also have a compost bin, a large compost bin that's our heat source that off heats 24/7. So that's what keeps the greenhouse warm and above freezing at night. So this is our compost bin. The compost is now decomposed, so it's low down here. But when we first built it, that would have been about 10 months ago, it was topped off right up to the top with compost. As materials decompose, they produce heat. And so we were taking advantage of that heat to heat the greenhouse. It didn't heat the whole greenhouse, but it heated the area where we had the seedlings. During the winter growing season, the compost was right up to the top. We put our seedling trays right on top of the compost pile. There's wood chips on the top of it. So we had a nice surface for the trays. And then the trays kept warm during the day from the sun and from the heat from the compost pile. On cold nights, we would put roll cover and or plastic over the trays, and that would trap the heat from the compost bin right in the area where the seedlings were, and keep the seedlings warm all night. So on our very, very coldest nights, I think it got down to 12 degrees outside, and under the 2 layers of plastic over the compost bin, the seedlings were kept. The coldest they got was 47 or 48 degrees, and they mostly stayed above 60 most nights. So it worked really well for us. It was a very, very reliable and inexpensive method of heating our greenhouse without using fossil fuels. So we also took advantage of basic solar principles. We used straw bales for the north wall to help insulate the north wall, and we built it really tight, so all the plastic is sealed at the edges. We're able to close the door securely, the windows, all the edges, so that we're not getting drafts through the greenhouse.
In conventional agriculture, they keep taking stuff out of the soil. They're not putting things back in the soil. They're dependent on spraying all the fertilizers and the pesticides and the herbicides and the fungicides. So the dirt is just something to hold the plant up. It's not feeding the plant anymore. We're adding all that microbial richness back to the soil, so the stuff that we're growing is much, I mean, you all know, you're at an organics conference. It's a lot more nutritious. Everything since World War II, all the nutritional value of a lot of our food has gone down since World War II. Corn, wheat, vegetables, fruits. So we're trying to encourage people to think about feeding your micro herd under the soil, not your cattle herd above the soil, but your micro herd under the soil. If you're feeding that, then you're keeping all that alive for the plants. There's a permaculture design principle called roots in the ground year round. So we're trying to do that so that we're feeding all that magic that happens, that plants can convert sunshine into, through their plants and roots, sugars that they exchange with other microbes and stuff that feed off that then, I'm not a biologist, so I don't know how to describe all that magic, but if we're feeding it, then the plants will take care of themselves. So what we're doing here, creating compost piles. I don't know if y'all have much experience composting, but when you put brown, green, water, and air together, then it starts doing that thing that we've been taught our whole life to stay away from. Rotting, fungus, nasty, smelly, putrefying food. Well, you're in the middle. Every time I go to Whole Foods, I probably pick up, like I said, 2 to 5 pallets. Each one of those pallets is about a half a ton. So when we bring home here to make these piles, in each one of these piles is probably 6, 8, 10 tons of food waste. So you're standing in the middle of probably 150 tons of rotting food waste right now. But probably it doesn't smell much because we've got enough carbon that if you're smelling something stinking, you're losing the valuable quality of your compost, because that's the nitrogen that's leaving in the air that smells, kind of like rotten eggs or rabbit hutch. You smell that ammonia. That's the nitrogen. So you want to put more carbon and more air. Every time we build one of these piles, they're as full as that one over there, and as it breaks down, it slowly settles and settles and settles. So we made windrows here that have been covered with all these volunteer plants, and that's probably the best way to compost, because as the hot air rises, it sucks cool air in from the side, so it stays real efficient and it doesn't get anaerobic, which is out without oxygen. These piles can obviously do a lot more, but we learned once we built those that we cut off the oxygen flow from the sides. So we started putting in chimneys. Our friend David, and you can see that chimney, and do you see the steam coming out of that chimney? And it goes all the way down. As we build the pile, we keep raising that bucket, and the wood chips allows that hole to stay there. And so that hole allows air to circulate all the way to the bottom of the pile. In the wintertime, it's fun coming over here because you'll see every pile is just steaming out. There's no dirt in this. No soil, no dirt. This is completely broken down food waste and wood chips after it's gone through a hot compost pile, and then the worm's stomach. When a worm eats something, it turns it into something 10 to 15 times richer than when it starts. So, and worms don't have teeth, so they can't eat the food, but they can eat the mold. So moldy bread is great. Moldy food is great because that's what the worms can eat. And this is the magic for plants. This stuff will help resist transplant shock, help plants resist disease and pests. And this is what allows Leah to grow all the amazing stuff she grows at the farm. We were composting with worms across this fence 20 years ago. So when we built this and started composting here, we thought we brought in one bucket of worms and put it over there, and we were gonna let the compost work, and then after the compost cooled off, we'd bring the worms over. By the time the compost it was completely full of worms. The worms had migrated over on their own and taken over the whole lot. So now there's red wiggler worms everywhere in every square inch of this. This is our worm harvester. We built this slough on the front so it makes it easier for us to process our finished compost. It goes through here. This is 1/8 inch screen. This is 1/4 inch screen, and everything that goes through all the way to the end we call tailings, and we put that back in the compost pile. The 1/8 inch screen we call worm castings. The other part we call worm compost, and we sell the 1/8 inch screen stuff, and the coarse stuff we use in the farm. And every time Leah plants another row, she asks for another couple of wheelbarrows of this stuff, so we bring it over. After 12 months, the microbes have broke it down. The red wiggler worms have processed it for about 6 months. Then we put it in here, and that adds all that microbial richness back to the soil, and helps plants resist transplant shock, helps plants resist pests and diseases, and it feeds the microbes in the soil everywhere so that soil becomes a living soil, and helps support plants so that plants can take care of themselves and don't need much care from us, because all those microbes and enzymes and protozoa and all that stuff's in the soil now because we've added it from here. This is what we get. There's no dirt in this, no soil. This is all broken down food waste and wood chips from Whole Foods and tree companies.